Welcome to Daily Life Connection. Let's continue to explore characteristics of who God is today. And because I believe it enriches our lives and how we live out our daily existence, how we relate to other people, how we relate to our Father in heaven. When I was a kid, I remember going to our church prayer meetings, and there was an older gentleman there by the name of Leonard. And I remember him because his false teeth were loose and they would often click and clack when he prayed. But more than that, I remember every time he prayed that I can remember, he always prayed for the Shekinah, for the Shekinah glory, he would call it, of God. And I remember that word was such a strange word that it caught my attention. And all through my life, it has fascinated me to read about it a little bit and to study it. It's not a word that's found in the Bible, but it is a word that early Jewish writers used to describe the manifest presence of God. And it refers back to, remember when Moses built the tabernacle in the wilderness, and when they dedicated it, the glory of God filled it. The cloud, the smoke, the luminance came down upon it so strongly that nobody could get in. And then when Solomon built his temple and dedicated it to the Lord, again the glory of God came upon it. It's found in Ezekiel. You remember when God is saying, or Ezekiel is prophesying, and he's having a vision of the temple, and because of Israel's rebellious nature and because of their lack of concern for God and worship of God, it said the glory of God lifted off of the tabernacle or off of the temple and departed. That is all about the Shekinah or Shekinah, depending on whether you're American or British. The Shekinah of God, the glory of God, the manifest presence of God. God delighted in being so present with his people that he was easily perceived. Does that make sense to us? I think you and I experience the Shekinah of God when there are moments in our lives when we are just so aware of the presence of God. It just feels like you could almost reach up and touch his presence. It's so real. That's the Shekinah of God, the glory of God in a manifest and real way. Well, like I say, that concept fascinates me. It's also interesting because it is in Hebrew it is a feminine word as well. We often don't think of our God in a feminine sense, but this word for the manifest presence of God is a feminine word, revealing to us the character of God in a different kind of way. Our God is so rich. We know He's neither male nor female, but we have to use those terms to describe who He is. And somehow this Shekinah, this manifest presence of God's glory among us, and it talked about how that the Shekinah dwelt between the cherubim over the mercy seat on the Ark of the Covenant in the Holy of Holies. It was like a condensed presence of God. Don't you love those times? Don't you just get passionately desirous of more of them? I know I do. I have experienced some wonderful Shekinahs of God over my lifetime, and they are memories that stay with me and still warm my heart and encourage my soul. The Shekinah of God, the manifest, glorious, shimmering presence of God that just is so comforting and nourishing, and it just envelops us and makes us feel warm and safe and full of hope and just the Shekinah of God. I pray for more of it. I pray for it in your life today. That I just let's never lose our hunger for that manifest presence of God. I think sometimes we almost feel guilty or selfish for wanting more of His presence. to experience the Shekinah, almost like it's greedy or something. My goodness, no. He put that passion, that desire in our, that's what he created us for. He created Adam and Eve so that his manifest presence would be with them in the garden and they would experience him. And isn't it interesting that God is omnipresent, he's always with us, but it says in the cool of the day God came and walked in the garden. I think that's an expression of the Shekinah of God. There was a manifest presence of God that came to them and as they walked together in the cool of the day, in the breeze of the day. And that word breeze is almost a word, well, it's a similar word to the word for spirit, in the Spirit of God. And some writers have connected the Shekinah of God with the outpouring of the Holy Spirit, because his presence in the Holy Spirit comes to dwell in us. His Spirit is in us. We are the temples of God. Oh, yes. Yes, that's it, isn't it? We are the temples of God, and his Shekinah dwells in us. And God's presence was always in the tabernacle, was always in the temple, but there were times when the glory manifested in a cloud, in a luminous, shimmering, golden cloud. Don't think of some gloomy, old, dark thundercloud. Think of that shining presence like the sun rising in the fog, and all of a sudden the fog becomes very glowing and brilliant and golden. That's what the idea was of the cloud of the glory of God, the Shekinah of God in our lives today. Well, I pray that for you. I pray it for me too. God, let your glory, let your Shekinah be in and on and around us. Oh man, there is so much here, isn't there? You see, I think when Moses went up the mountain and got in the Shekinah of God on Mount Sinai, and remember it said he came down and his face glowed, his face was radiant. That was the Shekinah of God. It was so saturating him that he emanated it. It flowed out of him. Oh, friends, today I want that Shekinah of God to so saturate me that people around me experience his presence because it has so saturated me and flowing out of me. Oh, our world needs the Shekinah, doesn't it? And he wants to give it. Let's agree together in prayer today for the outpouring of his Shekinah, his manifested presence in glory on us, on our churches, on our families, on our community, in our cities, in our world. The glory of God will fill the world. The Shekinah of God will fill the world. Whew, there's so much here. That's in Revelation. You know, it's talking about there's no night there. Why? Because the Shekinah of God fills it. Let's think about that one today. There's lots to meditate on. God bless. We'll talk again tomorrow.